Isaac, you've been involved in film for a long time. Can you remember what your earliest movie memory was and kind of why it might have affected you so much?
There's a few earliest memories that I have that I've like traced back to my first films. I remember there must have been a re-release of Dumbo, and that's probably the first movie I remember seeing in the movie theater. Disney's Dumbo, the original, not this whatever they created a few years back. And it had such a huge impact on me. And I've been seeing movies my whole life. My parents were like really liberal about movies. They were like, go see whatever you want. They take me. I remember seeing like, things that were definitely above my head when I was a little kid. But what most impacted me was when I was, I believe, in second grade. I saw a film called The Red Balloon in class. It was a French film, one of these movies that they would only show in schools. And it blew my mind and it had such an impact on me. And I was able to really come to life in school by following this film. And it's a film ultimately about, I'd say it has an anti-bullying message. It's about a kid who's an outcast and befriends a balloon that ends up getting bullied by some kids. But he shows them in the end. And I realized then the educational value of film, how films can change you, how films can teach you something, and how films can really be used to send out good messages into this world.
Even at that young age, you were able to decipher that.
I hope most kids would be able to like figure out, oh, here's a movie about that's against bullying. We should not behave this way.
Sure.
And it might not have been as of a sophisticated way that I might have put it now, but early on, it was definitely, I felt the educational impact, and I saw it as I've always seen film as a form of not just entertainment but education as well. And it's a way to impact people, and knowing that I am impacted by it.
So was that the driving force as you were starting, not only your career, but earlier on when you kind of realized, hey, I want to pursue this as not only a passion, but maybe even a career?
Absolutely. It's been, I've connected those dots from the beginning, and always look for movies that have, and it doesn't have to be like, a straightforward educational value, but actually just may improve our world. And sometimes it's just by creating some fantasy and creating a world that's poetic. It doesn't necessarily have to be a straight on, oh, here's this kind of value and that kind of value, that this film is there to educate. I don't want films to be, I don't know, movie of the week kind of educational films. Sometimes Hallmark does a lot of those, but really I think they don't have movies of the week anymore. I think it is just, they've all been.
I don't think so. Yeah.
It's really about having movies that realize what an impact they have and use that in a positive way. I'm a believer in storytelling. I like really good storytelling. So any movie and it could be like, an action film that's told really well. I think that's something that is important to our society. That's important to community. And movies on their own also create community. I mean, it's, we don't sit around the fire anymore. We sit around the projector.
I think I can really relate to that as well. Being a sports broadcaster, a play-by-play broadcaster, it's all about telling stories. And yes, what's going on in a game, but humanizing athletes and giving someone a chance and a reason to root for them. And I think that kind of just defines humanity in a lot of ways, right? The ability to seek out these types of stories that you identify with, that ultimately maybe they're not even so influential in your life, but they make you feel a part of something, don't they?
Yes, exactly. It's those human connections. I mean, that is basic. It's something that absolutely everyone with a heartbeat, right, can do. And often we see people as so distant from us, but when stories are told well and bring out that human element, they can reach billions and billions of people because we can all connect to that, and it makes other people not seem as far from us as they might have at first.
Yeah, well said. Diving back into your past, Isaac, you were born in New York, but you grew up in Israel, right? And produced education films when you were in the IDF. What what is that like? And there's the same motif of education and just trying to get the word out via film.
Yeah, I was going to avoid my IDF background sometimes, but it definitely had a huge impact on also my understanding of the use of films for education. Some might call it, in some circumstances, propaganda,
Sure.
but actually, there were all different kinds of films that I was privileged to be able to make in the Israeli army, where film was just at the beginning. I mean, I'm a little older. I'm sure now film is being used all the time, but film was really just starting to be used as an educational tool in the army. They told us that we can't make movies that last more than 7 minutes because soldiers are exhausted and they'll fall asleep in the dark. And really gave us a lot of great training on how to be educators, and at the same time how to be able to use all the back then antiquated military equipment to make films. But it's an amazing experience and had amazing access to production, and you can imagine that the military allows you to do things that most I don't know, film students wouldn't be allowed to do and wouldn't have the access to. You need that plane to go around a few more times, not a problem. um,
What kind of movies were you producing?
and it was anything from motivational films like to motivate soldiers in
Oh,
their units,
uh-oh.
to films about how to use certain equipment and how to get into, like, the
Wait,
details.
Isaac, you broke up a little bit. So let's do that question again. I think you
Take that
just
one
dropped
again,
out,
sure.
unfortunately. But just what kind of films were you producing?
We produced anything from motivational films that taught soldiers how to like their unit a little bit more, and or to films that explained how to actually work some piece of equipment. Sometimes we would also actually make documentaries where we would follow a unit through a certain. I was luckily enough to be in the military during a relatively peaceful period, so it wasn't that there was that much action, and it was more training opportunities. And just like I'm sure they do, I know they do with sports games. You want to tape your training and then rewatch it and learn from it.
Oh, all the time.
And you want to get it from all the right angles too. So that's something that was another part of the many different kinds of movies we made there.
So when did you finish your service and decide to come back to America?
So I finished my service when I was 21, and came back to America for a month to work on an independent film. I was lucky enough to get a job as a production assistant on a small indie, and one thing led to another. That led to another job, and then I got into school, and then I was in debt, so I had no choice but to stay.
And you went to Columbia for film.
Yeah, yeah.
What were some of your
Hence
biggest?
the debt.
Yeah, well, that'll do it, right? Ivy League, certainly. What were some of your biggest takeaways from that experience, and kind of, I would imagine, learning about film on a whole different level when you talk about the lecturers and the types of people that you get to interact with there, as opposed to when you were growing up.
Yeah, the it actually gave me the exact opposite of, and that's exactly what I needed of what I got in the army. The army gave me a very technical background and gave me experience, but Columbia, their film program focuses on theory, history, and writing. And those were the things that I actually was even more passionate about and needed more support for. So really talking about how to tell a story, how to understand and dissect films, um, and really knowing more of the history and watching some of the great films that then inform your understanding of film as you grow up. I mean, for me, film. A lot of people. I'm a learning disability, and reading is not my strong suit. And I get much more from watching movies. So having the opportunity, I think I was recently thinking back about how I was able to have 4 years of being able to sit there in that dark room and watch all these movies that at this point in my life I would never have time or ability really to see in that level. It's really something that's very special.
Yeah, I consider myself, a movie person for sure, and there are so many on my list that I'm just like, when am I going to do this? When am I going to go back and watch a movie from the 50s when I can watch something that's brand new that I haven't seen before, that's not in black and white. It can be tough sometimes. I'm curious though, did you have Annette Insdorf as a professor when you were at Columbia?
Annette Insdorf is a mentor to me and
She's a friend of the
continues.
program. She was in the first season.
Oh, amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. We have her here all the time. She was one of the first supporters of the ReelAbilities Film Festival, and has been an amazing supporter of me personally and my entire career. So
That is
true inspiration.
that is so cool. Yeah, I've been going to Real Pieces over at 92Y for years, and yeah, learned a lot, and gotten some pretty cool opportunities over there as well. So after that, you go to work at Miramax, right? What did you learn there?
Miramax. I learned that I didn't want to work at Miramax. That's really what I learned.
At Miramax, or just in the industry in general?
And I'd say I'd go further that I realized that that wasn't the side of the industry that I really wanted to work on. I found the industry it lacked the artistic and educational um, backbone that I spent my whole life believing and spent the last 4 years of school really focusing on and developing. And I realized that was not the environment I wanted to work in. I could say even specifically, I didn't know about the horrible things, the most horrible things that were going on at Miramax with Harvey Weinstein. And I had direct contact to him and knew that this was not an environment that I wanted to work in. And unfortunately, I have to say that that was not the only place in Hollywood that was like that. I mean, it was kind of the environment in Hollywood. And this is something that I'm glad to hear, I hope is changing. But there was a pretty abusive environment, and you had to step on others to get ahead, and that's just was not in my spirit at all.
Was there still a desire to create film, or at that point did you decide, hey, let me go a different route, let me be more of a curator, a watcher, something in that vein?
I still wanted to create. I think that's something that I'm always still thinking about in the background of writing and coming up with ideas for stories. But as opportunity had it, the job that I started here at the JCC is had just opened up, and that was just a great opportunity for me to be able to have actually a full-time job that focused on my passions. And I kept saying that I've never had a boring day here. I've never felt for a day that this is a place that I don't want to be in, and this is like the atmosphere that I believe in. And I had this like almost blank slate that I was able to develop programs that I was passionate about. That really became my life, and I've been here now for 19 years, so it's really become a part of me and kind of the direction that I took in my career.
Yeah, was it kind of a no-brainer at first? Because it seems to me like, yes, maybe it's not the opportunity to work on movies directly, but you stay involved in the industry, you get a chance to sample so much and put together these chances for people to see a lot of films that maybe they wouldn't normally seek out on their own.
It was definitely a big choice, and I remember thinking like, oh, a job like this is so rare that I need to explore it.
Like, how
And
many of
once I
those even
explored it,
existed at the time, Isaac?
right, believe me, not many, and not many that like would be able to develop into everything that we've developed here in terms of just an ongoing program, as well as of course all of our different film festivals. This was it was an opportunity to grow something in really fertile ground, and I was excited to do it. And I knew, I mean, at first I thought, I'll be there for a couple of years and then I'll go back to filmmaking. But I got a little comfortable, and more opportunities kept coming up, that I really felt that this was my calling. And I have to say, I always joke that I have the easy side of the job. I know what it takes to make a film. These people have to make films. I just have to choose them and show them. And that's an important thing to do right too.
Yes, and it is something that you absolutely have done. The largest festival of its kind, the Real Abilities Film Festival, which is incredible. I've been able to attend some of them, and it is an opportunity for people to see, again, films that they normally wouldn't be able to showcase people that normally wouldn't be showcased. Tell me about it, and tell me about how you originally came up with that idea.
Well, we'll start with what you just said. That it was sometimes about thinking about what people are not seeing, what elements within the film world are being pushed to the side and not being presented, and that's part of what was important for me to present. Of course, I've always been passionate about disability inclusion, and that's something that has been a part of my life, my whole life. Um, but um, but I never thought that that was never in my plan to start a disability film festival. I was trying to show films that weren't being shown elsewhere that should be seen by more people, that are really great films. And I showed a couple of these films just relating to disability as one of the topics that I wanted to explore. And before I knew it, I had a stack of DVD screeners on my desk because that's how we watched films back then.
Yep.
And and I said, "Wow, we have a festival here. There are enough films here that can make up a really good festival."
Did the word
And
just get out? Was it totally organic like that?
well, as luck would have it, I met a woman named Anita Altman, who's my co-founder,
Mhm.
and she had the same idea, and she wanted to start a disability film festival after seeing the impact that these films have. And we got together, and she was running a network of disability organizations. So that helped build what Real Abilities became, because we were built from the inside, from these organizations, and making it a part of the community and not just an outsider perspective. So we got together and brought those two magical elements together: the community and the passion for film, and it took off right away.
Yeah, obviously, when you talk about, disabilities film festival, highlighting those, inclusion is probably the most important thing, but also inclusion from within that community, and being felt like, hey, this isn't something that you're doing for someone, it's something that you are doing with a community, right? There's a distinction there.
Absolutely. Listen, the disability representation in Hollywood and in general has been part of our goal to change. It's Disability often has come in, I'd say, the cinematic world with misrepresentation and with kind of I'd say sympathetic depictions, and often not really adding to the human picture of it, not even a nuanced picture, but rather just very like flat emotional um, picturing of disability. And we were seeing films that showed this differently and knew that the community wanted to be represented differently. I at the time didn't even officially consider myself part of the community. I would always say I'm here for the film. I'm bringing the film perspective. That's my job. I'm a filmmaker because I wanted this festival to be recognized for its cinematic qualities,
Right.
and know that this is a festival of the highest levels and not a pity film festival where you come and can feel bad for people with disabilities.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think one of the films, maybe the film that changed the mindset for a lot of people, was Coda when it won Best Picture. It was obviously a movie that drew, specifically in my case, just drew like emotions out of me that I never even thought I had. You could ask my wife. I was a mess at the end. I was just bawling my eyes out, and it just, I don't know, it meant so much. And I think one of the biggest things that there have been, criticisms from the deaf community. I've read about that, and one thing though that you mentioned is how it depicts the parents who, yes, are deaf, but they're small business owners. They're very successful in that way. They're seen as, just like regular human beings, sexually active, like even that stuff that I read, is something that that members of the deaf community have really praised the film for. Do you see that as maybe like Coda almost being a turning point for how people are able to see this type of film, and maybe where it could even go even higher in the future?
Absolutely. I mean, Coda was this huge moment and like such a success. It's a total ReelAbilities film. We screened it too and presented it and had
I saw
all
you at
the
Sean
filmmakers
and
there.
Troy in LA as well for a Q&A.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah, I mean that film is Troy has been with us for years. I mean,
Yeah.
now he's an Academy Award winner, but he used to be like our poster boy, and our poster suddenly got more cachet, and it's wonderful. And I think yes, obviously every film and every part of the disability community has its nuances and its different ways, and there's going to be criticisms of how something's depicted, and especially from within. But in terms of representation, I thought it was like a film that was done right and brought it didn't come from a pity perspective, and told a story that really saw the people, saw the human beings, showed the humanity in all of its characters, and they weren't defined necessarily just by their disability, but actually had character and deep and kind of a depth to them. So I think it did a lot of good, and what's important to say is that that should be the beginning, and not like, okay, done. I thought for a moment, okay, wait a minute, Coda is winning the Academy Award, we're done, that's it, we're in, we don't have to show these movies anymore because everybody's watching these movies. But it is such an uphill battle for inclusion, and the truth is the disability community is so diverse, and doesn't only, like, the deaf community within the disability community is just one community, which, by the way, doesn't always consider itself part of the disability community. And that's just like one element to the complexities that exist within this very, very diverse community that has such a long way to go in terms of its inclusion and acceptance, and just its recognition within Hollywood to start, and but then trickling down to the rest of the world.
One of the films that you've shown is Cha Cha Real Smooth, which was directed by Cooper Raiff, starred Vanessa Burkhardt, who plays an autistic character and is autistic in real life. And she did a Q&A. Actually, Cooper had to go to the hospital. It was some sort of emergency, and Vanessa and you did the Q&A together, and it was really moving and inspirational. And I'm just wondering, what kind of things have you learned from these conversations that you've been able to even just take into your own life after this?
So first, I want to pause on the like authenticity that you mentioned here. That she was Cooper went and hired. It could have hired an actor to play somebody who's autistic, but instead he hired an autistic woman to play that role. And I think that's something that needs to be acknowledged, and is part of the goals of the festival, is to raise awareness towards authentic representation, which for so long, disability specifically, that was your way to get an Academy Award, right? You would play somebody who's disabled, and it's of course both left out a lot of disabled people from certain roles that they can do, and it also gives misrepresentations at times. So having that there, and having actually the Q&A with the person who is representing disability in this film, that's actually what matters to me the most. And definitely had I was I was sad that Cooper is such a nice guy, had to run off to a friend in the hospital and is taking care of somebody, ran off in the middle of the movie, but made sure that his star was in good hands, and made sure for us that we could have the conversation that was so desperately needed. So it was good to make it about her at that moment.
Yeah, and she's phenomenal in it. It's a great film, and yeah, I think it opened my eyes too to what, and I don't know that this might make me look bad, but what an autistic actor could do, because for so long, you're right, someone in that situation would be, just a regular Hollywood actor. I think of, I mean, obviously, one of the biggest would be Rain Man and Dustin Hoffman, and I know that probably in the long run that's done a lot of damage. And
Yeah,
wouldn't
I
you
always
agree what you've
reference that
seen?
film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I reference Rain Man as one of the examples. I love Rain Man. I love Dustin Hoffman. He's one of the
You're a
greatest
fantastic
actors
actor.
of our time.
Yes.
And that movie is really well written. But but I will say that in terms of the damage it's done to the disability community, and that was the representation
Right.
of autism. And so many people, like, thought that, oh, well, autistic means that you can count cards, and obviously that's just one very rare representation of autism.
Now we've been diving into why it's important to have this festival, but I want to kind of get into the nitty gritty of how you do it. What goes into curating this, and what are you looking for? How are you using your creativity in deciding what film kind of makes the cut and what doesn't?
Wow, how much time do we have? No, I'm kidding.
As much as
It's
you want.
Whew, it is a big process, but I'll tell you, I'll go to the last part of that question in terms of what I try to bring. I try to continue to bring um, the obviously we want to have good representation of disability, and we want to have progressive representation, and we're looking for new ways and seeing disability like they've never seen before, and seeing new disabilities that have never been presented on film before. We want all of that, but I feel that my real job is cinematic quality still. I want to make sure these are good stories and these are being told well, and the production values are of the highest level, and I feel that that's what Real Abilities needs to make sure to represent. And we're lucky enough that we could check all the boxes. You don't have to compromise production to bring in representation. You could have both great representation and a progressive approach to disability, and a film that speaks both to insiders and outsiders at the same time, and still have high production quality and good writing. And usually, actually, it makes sense for those things to go hand in hand, because usually when you're making a really good movie and you have a good director that's working with a good producer that knows to make sure that the production is as progressive as possible, then you're going to get a good product too.
How many submissions are you going through for this?
We go over a few hundred submissions. I think we had about 400 this year, and that's after we kind of limit them, making sure that it's not. One year we didn't put a fee on our submissions, and we got every movie in the world submitting. So we'll never break that record, but we now put a symbolic fee there just so people can't just click a box and submit a film to us, and they have to be on topic. We also have a very specific form that every film needs to fill out in order to submit, that talks about how disability has been part of the filmmaking process. Like, how is this first person? How is this coming from within and not from outside? The casting, of course, is always interesting to us. I don't want to say that it needs to be always has to be authentic, because I think that's not always possible, but we want it to be responsible. So we want to make sure that that's a part of it, and want to know where disability really, in the filmmakers' lives, plays a part in the filmmaking process. So that's the first thing I look at when I get a film.
What are some of those stories, though? Is it directors and filmmakers that are personally dealing with this and part of the disability community, or friends, family, something they're interested in? What's the spectrum we're talking?
I mean, it's amazing how diverse it gets. First of all, it's amazing to see how many filmmakers out there actually have disabilities, but don't necessarily get the opportunities. This would be their first opportunity, and it breaks my heart each time when we don't take. We can't take all of the films that are out there. We have to say no to great films that are being made by a disabled filmmaker who's telling their story in such an amazing way, but we just don't have room for everything.
Now, how do you
And
say no to that? That
how do,
seems like that's got to be
and
the
we
toughest part of the job, right?
it is, and we have to say no to a lot of those. I make more enemies than I make friends, and um, but there's just simply not enough room for all of them, and those are tough choices that we need to make and figure out how to create some sort of balance. And you want intersectionality, and you want different disabilities to be represented, and we really see beyond the selections, which are amazing. We see many more amazing films that don't make it into the final cut, that I'm not sure where they go, but are worthy of a stage, and definitely have unique stories and stand out from, like, most films that are out there.
there's, obviously criteria that need to be met. It's not an easy process to pick a film that is going to be included in a film festival, I would imagine. But what are you looking for? Is it a feeling? Is it something that you need to experience, or is there some sort of way that you can actually, decipher it for everybody?
I feel like the quantitative side of it is production value. First of all, you could see when something's like though sometimes you could shoot something on your phone and it'll look good enough, and if you tell it in the right way, if it's a story that makes sense that it would be shot on your phone, like I would give the example of like the Blair Witch Project is a film that's made in a rough way, but it fits what it needs to what the story that it's trying to tell. Do people know what the Blair Witch Project is?
I think they still do. Yeah.
Yeah, good, good. One of my favorites. Um, but it's it's not just enough to like say, oh, production quality, this was made for $1 million, but to really see that the filmmaking is that there's a language there. I think that's something that's easy enough to decipher. We have a full committee that sits there and also argues about representation of disability, and we make sure there's people from a variety of disabilities and walks of lives that can bring in their expertise really to this cinematic process. We also want to have cinema experts there, people who know what good movie is, and I'm trying to think where else we bring in we look for representation is also, that's like say the biggest arguments is how disability is being represented. We want to avoid some of the classic inspirational films, and we look for new ways of presenting disability. We were having this whole discussion this year specifically on the topic of parenting, not of films about parents. Of parents of people who are disabled, but of people with disabilities wanting to become parents, and what it's like, what that parenting experience is like, and how that differs. And those are stories that also we want to bring out there. We want to look for new stories, but good storytelling. I think that's where we started, and that's the bottom line of all of this. You just
Yeah.
want a movie that you're going to sit there, and it doesn't matter what walk of life, how old you are, what your background is, that you're going to watch a story and you'll be engaged, whether you live this story or it is as far from you as possible. You want to be engaged because it's told well.
I think sometimes you just know, right? You watch something and you're like, it's got it.
It's got it. There might be a little bit of an it factor there. I like
Yeah.
to think that there's always a way to analyze that it factor, and
Yeah.
I
That's
try
right.
to figure it out. I'm like, why do I love this film so much? What
Right.
makes this film so great? But I don't always have the words for it.
On the management side and growing this film festival into what it is, how have you had to be creative in setting up? I mean, it's grown in scale so much. I know New York is kind of the home base, but there are many others around the U.S. And what has it taken over the years for you to get this to where it is now?
I mean, it's been beautiful to watch our baby grow and become a national and international program. I'd like to take credit for it, but I actually, first of all, have to say that, of course, I work with a team that has made this all happen, and also we have a product that was in surprisingly high demand. And by the way, since Coda, that has only grown. The demand for these kinds of films, people are saying, "Oh, wait a minute, we want to highlight disability more." But I'd say in the last 16 years since we started, we've watched how that demand for disability inclusion has grown, and the diversity and inclusion movement has definitely also added to that in terms of people looking to tell stories that represent underrepresented groups. So yeah, the cities, honestly, it grew organically. The cities were coming to us. We had to eventually at one point set up a system, but we're right now we're doing kind of a strategic study on what we should be doing. There's so much demand for real abilities and the action that we need to take in our world, that we need to start making tough choices of what to focus on. We would love to do everything, and that's kind of what we've been doing, but we needed to put together a real strategic plan and really know what we should be focusing on, because we started bringing our films to educational facilities. We started bringing our films to office buildings. We launched a couple of years ago an industry summit where we became really the voice of disability and accessibility in the film industry, and that took off too. All these things took off, and we need to really figure out what we want to focus on. There's so many other opportunities. There's so many. We've also gone beyond film. Other art forms have come our way, and we're have some from early on been presenting dance, music, theater, and comedy, which I consider also to be an art form. And we really need to figure out where we could best put our energy.
It always fascinates me why people are the way they are. And, when you talk about the disabilities and film, why do you think that there are more people that are interested right now, or it's kind of taking off? I mean, you don't think people have just grown more compassionate or more interested over time, but is it just getting it out there and people knowing that, hey, this exists right now, or do you think maybe it might be something else?
I think there's a few different elements here that make the people more interested in disability film right now. If that's the bottom line, I think first of all the diversity and inclusion element of it, that people right now are looking to diversify in their workspace, in their personal lives, in different ways to make sure that those who are not included, who haven't been included historically, are more included. I think part of our job is also to break down taboos relating to the disability community, and I think those are slowly through a lot of these great films and movies like Coda and many other films that have come up over the years. There was a film that was actually shot here in our building with some of our members called Keep the Change a few years ago, and it won an award at Tribeca. And it's a film that really breaks down the taboos in terms of autism, and it follows young adults with autism, and their love story, I'd say. Um, and I think a lot of people also are owning their disability more. Disability used to be a bad word. Used to be a word that people couldn't say. You run a festival about different abilities. I was like, no. You could say disability. They're about disabilities, and it's not a bad word anymore. And people can really feel that they can own and put their disability out there. They can. I fill out all these forms now. Whenever I'm filling out a form, it's asking me, "Oh, are you a person with a disability? Do you identify as a person with a disability?" And I get to check a new box, and those boxes weren't even there before. So I think that's something that has definitely people are proud to be disabled these days. People are proud to be more diverse these days, and I think that's opened a lot of doors. I'll also say that 32 years ago was the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and um, the legal changes are slowly coming into place. I mean, there's always more. We're finally making the subways accessible in New York, and there had to be another lawsuit about that to actually make that possible. And I think after the legal changes comes the cultural change, and I think we're at that point now where there's room for a cultural change, for people to start. Okay, now that people with disabilities can actually be a part of our society because the access is growing. I won't say it's completely there yet, but it's growing. Now it's time for the culture to become more accepting.
As you mentioned that, and I don't want to pry, but reading was difficult for you. Is it dyslexia? Is that what?
So I love it that there's this new term that I've been using, neurodivergent, and that's a great way to identify it, because it was categorized as dysgraphia with some dyslexia and ADHD. So it's frontal lobe related, as far as I understand. I'm not a neurologist, but It's but you can't put a disability into a box. You
Sure.
know, it's
Yeah.
not, especially one that it has to do with the brain. It's going to, you know, not everybody who's dyslexic is going to have the exact same writing trouble. Not everybody who's or reading trouble. It's really funny. I'll tell you, this is the first time I'm telling anybody this. My parents were visiting this weekend, and they found my second grade report card, and they brought it to lunch for some reason, and I'm not sure why. And I hadn't remembered this at all. But back then, I guess I went to a pretty to they didn't have progressive schools back then, and my school, I was graded, got a great grade in math. I got an A, and you know my participation was great. My grades in handwriting and spelling, I got an F in handwriting. It was clearly a disability. They couldn't identify it back then. This was in second grade, but possibly didn't even have the words for it back then. But I can't believe that they actually failed a second grader because of their handwriting not being up to par. And couldn't recognize that maybe, wait, he's understanding anything. He's doing the math pretty well. What's going on here with the handwriting? Maybe there's something else going on. Um, but but it's definitely something that I've learned a lot of and learned to own and to be proud of, which is not something that I would have always admitted in the past. I would have never told the story on a show that could get to potentially billions of people.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt. I would hope though that maybe a teacher would try to figure this out a little bit deeper at this point than when you were back in second grade and say, "Hey, what's going on here?" I think we're a little bit more on the right path than that.
No question. My
Yeah.
son has inherited my disability as well, exactly the same. Well, not exactly because you can't put it in a box, but has a lot of the same structures. And he's growing up in this different world, and he's proud of it. He loves his disability. He gets to use a computer to type. He has. Has all this other access, and the attitude has completely changed. And it's not just him; it's half his class. Their disabilities are recognized. So it's really a new world, which I'm sorry that I missed out on.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, you're helping to make it certainly a more compassionate one and a more understanding one for sure. Going forward, what are you looking for audiences to take away from the Real Abilities Film Festival, and will you continue to try to grow this as far as you can take it?
I mean, as I said, it's an uphill battle. We really want to bring in as many people as possible to experience real abilities and to love these movies and for these movies to become mainstream. But at the same time, we never want to lose that core element of celebrating the disability community and giving the disability community a moment in the spotlight. I mean, there are so few moments where disability is really given that stage in our world that we want to stay as focused as possible on our core topic, which is like filmmakers with disabilities being put out there into the world and having their insight. We love the outsiders. We want to reach the outsiders, but we also love the insiders who are coming in and saying, "Hey, that's me on the screen, and I feel recognized and I feel a part of this."
What are the plans for the future? Anything big in the works?
So, Real Abilities International is going through this whole strategic planning, and we're trying to take things to a whole new level and develop new programs. I really want Real Abilities films to be in every public school and in every private school, and for these films to get out there as much as possible. We also just launched a streaming site, so now
Oh
people can
crap.
access films from past festivals and see these films that weren't possibly never able to be seen before, to see them online from the comfort of their homes in an accessible way. So,
Isaac, you cut out again. I'm sorry.
oh, I'm sorry.
I don't know if it's I don't think it's I don't know what it is, but
I don't know. I
it could
have
be
full
my
bars, but yeah,
maybe
you,
since
you
you're
never
not on. Are
you
you on
never know.
Wi-Fi?
I'm on Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
am
on my
I. I
laptop.
don't know. Sometimes it happens, but can you just start that answer again? I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Just
give
like
me the
your
question again, so
just
I can get it
your
rolling.
plans for the future and what the next step is for Real Abilities.
So we're going through a lot of strategic planning and trying to get our films into educational spaces, schools, and other spaces, and get these films to as many places as possible. We just launched a streaming site which gives access to many of our past films, which people might not have ever had access before. And of course, we're doing that also with groundbreaking accessibility. So these are some of the things that we're hoping to develop and grow.
Was it an easy situation coming up with the name? Because it's a great name.
It makes some people unhappy. Some people, well, let me give you all the complaints. People don't like films that don't like disability groups that use the term abilities as if it will diminish the dis part of it. Our first year, we had a consultant that came on with the name, and I want to give credit. It was Ravit Georgiman, who is our chief operating officer till this day. She actually, I believe, came up with the name. And we had it as reel, as in film reels, which, by the way, is obsolete at this moment. We don't use film reels anymore. Everything's digital. But we're keeping it because film is at our core. But in our first year, our consulting company told us to spell real abilities REAL, as in real abilities. And that upset the disability community, or the progressive side of it, who were like, what are their non-real abilities? And like, why is that word even being used? And we very quickly pivoted and went back to the original title that we had thought of and wanted to highlight and really make this about film and disabilities at the same time. And when film and disability come together, you got real abilities.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's such a great name. I love it. That's not the only thing you do, though. You're also curating films at the JCC in Manhattan on the Upper West Side. How do you just like how can you possibly do all of this when you have your hand in so much?
So first of all, it's support from a really amazing team. I have to give them credit. I have this problem that there's so much that I want to do in my life, and I want to be able to reach people in so many different ways, and there's so many opportunities to develop these different programs that are so worthy that it's hard for me to figure out what to let go of. And I definitely should focus more. There's it's real abilities alone would have been enough, but I definitely share my time with some other children as well, and our other Israel Film Festival, which, by the way, inspired Real Abilities. It was this concept of doing a film festival about minority populations, and it not just being a film festival, but it being a conversation starter that would go beyond the films and actually take you deeper into these topics, which is also at the core of Real Abilities. So I feel like they all connect and they're all a part of me. So it's hard to get rid of any of my limbs, and I really I'm a I'm a, definitely take on a little too much at times, but rely on the support of the people around me to make it all happen.
Between everything that you do, how many films did you watch in 2023? Do you
Oh.
even keep a log or anything?
I don't have a specific log, but a few hundred films for sure. Knowing just doing the basic math of some of the films. That's like actually the saddest part of my job is it's become that I can't watch as many films as I would have liked to anymore. There's so much more going on than just watching the films that sometimes I need to just trust others and put the films out there. I'll admit sometimes I do a Q&A for a film. I'll moderate a Q&A for a film, and I hadn't even seen the film. I got to watch 15 minutes in the middle while I was running around, and have to hope that there were no dramatic twists or changes beyond what I saw.
Has that ever bit you at some point?
I don't think I've covered up for it. I've definitely been able to cover for it. I don't think that the filmmakers ever knew that I hadn't
Right.
necessarily seen their whole film, or even most of it.
Well, that's certainly a good thing. Uh, What are some of your creative pursuits outside of film? I know there's probably not a ton of downtime, but what is something else that you like to do to stoke that fire?
To unwind, I like to dream about the vacations that I don't have time to go on, and I love just researching vacations. I love like everybody else today. I'm into cooking, and I love cooking and trying new foods too. So not only cooking but actually eating. Um, which is crucial. And I'm always desperate to get back to writing. I've been for the last few years been working on a couple of books that relate to all these themes, and feel like it's important to get them out there. And writing is a challenge for me, but luckily with today's technology and computers, and no, I'm not using AI to write my book, but I'm able to, I think, piece enough together and turn some of what I'm doing into an actual book, which comes from also I during the pandemic. One of the directions that we pivoted in is I started teaching courses online, and there was a thesis to each course, and putting those into words and putting those into actually onto paper, I think is an important thing to do.
What kind of books are we talking? I know it has to do with with everything that you've been working on, but is it fiction? Is it a memoir?
It's actually about film, and it's about so one of them, for instance, that I'm working on is about one of the topics that I've explored in my film viewing is I've probably seen more Holocaust films than 99% of the people out there. That's what happens when you run the film program at the JCC, and writing about a new wave of Holocaust films which continue to flourish and be a part of our cinematic treasures that are out there. So um, I taught a course on that, and I'm trying to put it all together and piece it together. Israeli cinema is another topic that I've been exploring for close to 20 years, and have been seeing probably more films than many out there, and run a streaming site for that as well. And I'm talking about where new Israeli cinema came from, and how it got there and where it's going is also something that I'd love to find the time to fully articulate.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole episode on Israeli cinema and just how much it's blown up and grown. You look at Stiesel, you look at obviously Fauda, like these are TV shows, but
They grew
it's
out of the film industry.
yeah, it really is. It really is incredible. And I think there's such a, I don't know why, but there's such a hunger for, at least for me, certainly, but I think for a lot of people, there's a hunger for Israeli cinema and film.
Absolutely. I've watched that demand grow as well. And unfortunately, right now, of course, the entire industry I'm watching, and I have to take a moment to, if we're talking about film in Israel, to take a moment to say that the whole industry, with all of the tragic events that are going on there, the industry is really shuttered.
Right.
And this is impacting film. I think in the long term, in some ways, and I think the political situation is also going to impact the potential for Israeli cinema in some spaces, and we might be at the beginning of the end. Who knows? But
I hope
it's
not.
definitely a tragic time in general, and it's going to have its impact.
Yeah, there's no doubt, but hopefully better times ahead. Isaac, what looking forward, you have your hand in so many different things. Do you see there be a pairing back at some point, or are you just going to continue full steam ahead here for the near future?
I'm a big believer in distracting myself from death. So if I can keep myself distracted 24 hours a day, I'm a happy man.
Not a bad idea. Isaac, thank you so much for taking a few minutes with us. We really appreciate and enjoyed it.
Thank you, Alex.